Yes, you are here. I have captured you. And now you must listen to my evil plans. I will capture the audience, and then I will force them to listen to me reading books. Especially this one, The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton. And then, as they're suffering in agony, the book will pour them out of it, because books are amazing. And that is my evil plan. And you cannot stop me. So here we go. Enjoy it. Chapter 16. A Very Dirty Bird is what the name of it is called. Okay, here we go. It's chapter 16, everybody. Here we go. Up he went, very quickly at first, then more slowly, then in a little while even more slowly than that, and finally, after many minutes of climbing up the endless stairway, one weary foot was barely able to follow the other. Milo suddenly realized that with all his effort, he was no longer close to the top than when he began, and not a great deal further from the bottom. But when he struggled on for a while longer, until at last, completely exhausted, he collapsed onto one of the steps. I should have known it, he mumbled, resting his tired legs and filling his lungs with air. This is just like the line that goes on forever, and I'll never get there. Okay, who's talking? Uh-oh, new voice. I don't even know what I'm going to do. Let's do another little kid voice. You wouldn't like it that much anyway, someone replied gently. Infinity is a dreadfully poor place. They can never manage to make ends meet. Milo looked up with his head still resting heavily in his hand. He was becoming quite accustomed to being addressed at the oddest times in the oddest places by the oddest people. And this time he was not at all disappointed. Standing next to him on the step was exactly one half of a small child who had been divided neatly from top to bottom. Here's some pictures. The half kid. Pardon me for staring, said Milo after he had been staring for some time, but I've never seen a half a child before. It's 5.8 to be precise, replied the child from the left side of his mouth, which happens to be the only side of his mouth. I beg your pardon, said Milo. It's 0.58, he repeated. It's a little bit more than a half. Have you always been that way? Asked Milo impatiently, for he felt that was a needlessly fine distinction. My goodness, no, the child assured him. A few years ago, I was just 0.42, and believe me, that was terribly inconvenient. What is the rest of your family like, then? Said Milo, this time a bit more sympathetically. Oh, we're just the average family, he said thoughtfully. Mother, father, and 2.58 children. And, as I explained, I'm the 5.58. It must be rather odd being only part of a person, Milo remarked. Well, not at all, said the child. Every average family has 2.58 children, so I always have someone to play with. Besides, each family also has an average of 1.3 automobiles. And since I'm the only one who can drive 3/10 of a car, I get to use it all the time. But averages aren't real, objected Milo. They're just imaginary. That may be so, he agreed. But they're also very useful at times. For instance, if you didn't have any money at all, but you happened to be with 4 other people who had $10 apiece, then you'd each have an average of $8, isn't that right? I guess so, said Milo weakly. Well, how much better off you'd be just because of averages? He explained convincingly. And I think of the poor farmer when it doesn't rain all year. If there wasn't an average yearly rainfall of 37 inches in this part of the country, all his crops would wither and die. It all sounded terribly confusing to Milo, for he had always had trouble in school with just this subject. There are still other advantages, too, continued the child. For instance, if one rat were cornered by 9 cats, then on the average, each cat would be 10% rat, and the other rat would be 90% cat. If you happen to be a rat, you can see how much nicer it would make things. But that can never be, said Milo, jumping to his feet. Don't be too sure, said the child patiently. For one of the nicest things about mathematics, or anything else you might care to learn, is that many things which can never be often are, you see, he went on. It's very much like you're trying to reach infinity. You know that it's there, but you just don't know where. But just because you can never reach it doesn't mean that it's not worth looking for. I hadn't thought of it that way, said Milo, starting down the stairs. I think I'll go back now. A wise decision, the child agreed. But try again someday. Perhaps you'll get much closer. And as Milo waved goodbye, he smiled warmly, which he usually did on the average of 47 times a day. Everyone here knows so much more than I do, thought Milo as he leaped from step to step. I'll have to do a lot better if I'm going to rescue the princesses. In a few moments, he'd reached the bottom again. And burst into the workshop, where Talk and the Humbug were eagerly watching the mathematician perform. Oh, okay. Back already, he cried, greeting him with a friendly wave. I hope you found what you were looking for. I'm afraid not, admitted Milo, and then he added in a very discouraged tone. Everything in Digitopolis is much too difficult for me. The mathematician nodded knowingly and stroked his chin several times. You'll find, he remarked gently, that the only thing you can do easily is be wrong, and that's hardly worth the effort. Milo tried very hard to understand all the things he'd been told and all the things he'd seen, and as he spoke, one curious thing still bothered him. Why is it, he said quietly, that quite often even the things which are correct just don't seem to be right? A look of deep melancholy crossed the mathematician's face, and his eyes grew moist with sadness. Everything was silent, and it was several minutes before he was able to reply at all. How very true, he sobbed, supporting himself on the staff. It has been that way since rhyme and reason were banished. Quite so, began the humbug. I personally feel it. And all because of that stubborn wretch Azaz, roared the mathematician, completely overwhelming the bug, for now his sadness had changed to fury, and he stalked about the room, adding up anger and multiplying wrath. It's all his fault! Perhaps if you discussed it with him, Milo started to say, but never had time to finish. He's much too unreasonable, interrupted the mathematician again. Why, just last month I sent him a very friendly letter, which he never had the courtesy to answer. See for yourself. He handed Milo a copy of the letter, which read, 4738 1919 667 394017 5841 62589 85371 14 39588 7190434 203 27689 57131 481 206 5864 98053 621 798 75073. But maybe he doesn't understand numbers, said Milo, who found it a little difficult to read himself. Nonsense, bellowed the math magician. Everyone understands numbers, no matter what language you speak. They always mean the same thing. A 7 is a 7 anywhere in the world. My goodness, thought Milo. Everybody's so terribly sensitive about things they know best. With your permission. That's not Talk's voice. With your permission, said Talk, changing the subject. We'd like to rescue Rhyme and Reason. Has Azaz agreed to it? The math magician inquired. Yes, sir, the dog assured him. Then I don't, he thundered again. For since they've been banished, we've never agreed on anything. And we never will, he emphasized, his last remark with a dark and ominous look. Never? Asked Milo with the slightest touch of disbelief in his voice. Never, he repeated. And if you can prove otherwise, you have my permission to go. Well, said Milo, who had thought about this problem very carefully ever since leaving Dictionopolis. Then, whatever Azaz agrees, you disagree? Correct, said the math magician with a tolerant smile. And with whatever Azaz disagrees, you agree? Also correct, yawned the math magician, nonchalantly cleaning his fingernails with the point of his staff. Then each of you agrees that he will disagree with whatever each of you agrees with, said Milo triumphantly. And if you both disagree with the same thing, then aren't you really in agreement? I've been tricked, cried the math magician, helplessly, for no matter how he figured, it still came out just that way. Splendid effort, commented the humbug jovially. Ooh, that's a good word. Exactly the way I would have done it myself. And now we may go. That's still not Talk's voice, but okay, added Talk. The math magician accepted his defeat with grace, nodding weakly, and then drew the three travelers to his side. It's a long and dangerous journey, he began softly, and a furrow of concern creased his forehead. Long before you find them, the demons will know you're there. Watch for them well, he emphasized, for when they appear, it might be too late. The humbug shuddered down to his shoes, and Milo felt the tips of his fingers suddenly grow cold. But there is one problem even more serious than that, he whispered ominously. What is it? Gasped Milo, who was not sure he really wanted to know. I'm afraid I can tell you only when you return. Come along, said the math magician, and I'll show you the way. And simply by carrying the three, he transported them all to the very edge of Dictionopolis. Behind them lay all the kingdoms of wisdom, and up ahead a narrow, rutted path led toward the mountains and darkness. We'll never get the car of that, said Milo unhappily. True enough, replied the math magician. But you can be in ignorance quick enough without riding all the way, and if you're to be successful, it will have to be step by step. But I would like to take more gifts, Milo insisted. So you shall, announced the dodecahedron, who appeared from nowhere with his arms full. Here are your sights, here are your sounds, and here, he said, handing Milo the last of them disdainfully, are your words. And most important of all, added the math magician, here's your own magic staff. Use it well. There is nothing it cannot do for you. He placed in Milo's breast pocket a small gleaming pencil, which, except for the size, was much like his own. Then, with a last word of encouragement, he and the dodecahedron, who was simultaneously sobbing, frowning, pinning, and sighing from 4 of his saddest faces, made their farewells and watched as the 3 tiny figures disappeared into the forbidding mountains of ignorance. Almost immediately, the light began to fade as the difficult path wandered aimlessly upward, inching forward, almost as reluctantly as the trembling humbug, Talk, as usual, led the way, sniffing ahead for danger, and Milo, his bag of precious possessions slung over one shoulder, followed silently and resolutely behind. "Perhaps someone should stay back to guard the way," said the unhappy bug, offering his services, but since his suggestion was met with silence, he followed glumly along. The higher they went, the darker it became, though it wasn't the darkness of night, but rather more like a mixture of lurking shadows and evil intentions which oozed from the slimy moss-covered cliffs and blotted out the light. A cruel wind shrieked through the rocks, and the air was thick and heavy, as if it had been used several times before. On they went, higher and higher, up the dizzying trail. On one side of the sheer stone walls was and brutal peaks towering above them, and on the other an endless, limitless, bottomless nothing. There's a very detailed picture of the math magician carrying everybody to the scary mountains. Okay. "I can hardly see a thing," said Milo, taking hold of Talk's tail as a sticky mist engulfed the moon. "Perhaps we should wait until morning." Okay. Oh man. All right. "There'll be morning for you soon enough," came a reply from directly above, and this was followed by a hideous crackling laugh. Very much like someone choking on a fishbone. I don't know if I can make that sound. Well, let me get a fishbone. All right. Clinging to one of the greasy rocks and blending almost perfectly with it was a large, unkempt, and exceedingly soiled bird who looked more like a dirty floor mop than anything else. He had a sharp, dangerous beak, and the one eye he chose to open stared down maliciously. "I don't think you understand," said Milo timidly as the watchdog growled a warning. We're looking for a place to spend the night." And here's a picture of the bird. "It's not yours to spend," the bird shrieked again, and followed it with the same horrible laugh. "That doesn't make any sense, you see," he started to explain. "Dollars a cent, it's not yours to spend," the bird replied haughtily. "But I didn't mean," insisted Milo. "Of course you mean," interrupted the bird, closing that eye that had been open and opening the one that had been closed. "Anyone who spends a night that doesn't belong to him is very mean." "Well, I thought that by..." he tried again desperately. "That's a different story," interjected the bird a bit more amiably. "If you want to buy, I'm sure I can arrange to sell. But with what are you doing? You'll probably end up in a cell anyway." "It doesn't seem right," said Milo helplessly, for with the bird taking everything the wrong way, he hardly knew what he was saying. "Agreed," said the bird with a sharp click of his beak. "But neither's left, although if I were you, I would have left a long time ago." "Let me try once more," Milo said in an effort to explain. "In other words..." "You mean you have other words?" cried the bird happily. "Well, by all means, use them. You're certainly not doing very well with the ones you have now." Must you always interrupt like that?" said Talk irritably, for even he was becoming impatient. "Naturally," the bird crackled. "It's my job. I take the words right out of your mouth. Haven't we met before? I'm the ever-present word snatcher, and I'm sure I know your friend the bug." And then he leaned all the way forward and gave a terrible, knowing smile. That's a picture. Okay. The humbug, who was too big to hide and too frightened to move, denied everything. Is everyone who lives in ignorance like you? Asked Milo.
Much worse,
He said longingly.
But I don't live here. I come from a place very far away called Context.
Don't you think you should be getting back? Suggested the bug, holding one arm up in front of him.
What a horrible thought!
The bird shuddered.
It's such an unpleasant place that I spend most of my time out of it. Besides, what could be nicer than these grimy mountains?
Almost anything, thought Milo as he pulled his collar up, and then he asked the bird, Are you demon?
I'm afraid not,
he replied sadly, as several filthy tears rolled down his beak.
I've tried, but the best I can manage is to be a nuisance.
And before Milo could reply, he flapped his dingy wings and flew off in a cascade of dust and dirt and fuzz. Wait! Shouted Milo, who thought of many more questions he wanted to ask.
34 pounds!
Shrieked the bird as he disappeared into the fog. He was certainly no help, said Milo after they had been walking again for some time.
That's why I drove him off,
cried the humbug, fiercely brandishing his cane.
Now let's find the demons.
That might be sooner than you think, remarked Talk, looking back at the suddenly trembling bug, and the trail turned again and continued to climb. In a few minutes they had reached the crest, only to find that beyond it lay another one even higher, and beyond that several more whose tops were lost in the swirling darkness. For a short stretch, the path became broad and flat, and just ahead, leaning comfortably against a dead tree, stood a very elegant-looking gentleman. He was beautifully dressed in a dark suit with a well-pressed shirt and tie. His shoes were polished, his nails were clean, his hat was well-brushed, and a white handkerchief adorned his breast pocket. But his expression was somewhat blank. In fact, it was completely blank, for he had neither eyes, nose, nor mouth. Another voice. Here we go. I don't know what to do with this voice here.
Hello, little boy,
he said amiably, shaking Milo by the hand.
And how's the faithful dog?
He inquired, giving Talk 3 or 4 strong and friendly pats.
And who's this handsome creature?
He asked, tipping his hat to the very pleased humbug.
I'm so happy to see you all. What a pleasant surprise to meet someone so nice.
Oh, they all thought, and especially here. Okay, I'm going to show the picture. It's kind of cool looking, actually. It's Slitherman. Okay. I wonder if you could spare me a little of your time, he inquired politely, and help with a few small jobs.
Why, of course, said the humbug cheerfully. Gladly,
added Talk. Yes, indeed, said Milo, who wondered for just a moment how it was possible for someone so agreeable to have a face with no features as well.
Splendid, he said happily, for there are just 3 tasks. Firstly, I would like to move this pile from here to there,
he explained, pointing to an enormous mound of fine sand.
But I'm afraid that all I have are these tiny tweezers,
and he gave them to Milo, who immediately began transporting 1 grain at a time.
Secondly, I would like to empty this well and fill the other, but I have no bucket, so you'll have to use this eyedropper.
And he handed it to Talk, who undertook at once to carry 1 drop at a time from well to well.
And lastly, I must have a hole through this cliff, and there is a needle to dig it.
The eager humbug quickly set to work picking at the solid granite wall. And there's another picture. When they had all been safely started, the very pleasant man returned to the tree and leaned against it once more, continuing to stare vacantly down the trail while Milo, Talk, and the humbug worked hour after 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 hour.
There you go. Holy crap. Lots of voices in that chapter. I hope that was enjoyable for you. Was it? Was that enjoyable? Did you like that? Watching me suffer through these voices. I like it. It's fun. But anyways, there you have it. Which chapter was this? That was chapter 16 of this wonderful book. I'm pretty sure that last guy was a demon. Shh, don't tell him. I'm pretty sure he was a demon. Just a heads up. I'd keep an eye on that guy. You know, the no-face man. The Slender Man guy. And then for the bird, I just did the witch voice again because, you know, they're very similar. I just added more squawks. But okay, yeah, there you have it. That was me reading this book here, and I love how there's illustrations in the book. You know, especially for kids. Kids love illustrated things more so than just words. So it really kind of sets you can still use your imagination, but you're also still seeing how the writer portrayed these characters and the land and everything. So it kind of makes you feel like you're there almost, seeing how it's going down because you're looking at the images. But then it also, on the retrospect, takes away from your own image of Milo. Maybe he's not British. Maybe he's Australian. Who knows? Okay, but I thought that maybe there was a movie or like a little cartoon of this book. But am I mistaken? Let me know in the comments and subscribe below. Like and subscribe. All right. Well, okay. Enough of this mumbo jumbo. Why don't we sign off here and well, maybe you'll stick with me on the last of this book here. We're getting towards the end. You know, there's probably just a few more chapters left. Look at that, huh? And it smells so good. Yes. I don't buy books to read them. I just smell them. Okay. Anyways, let's go now. All right, Drew, go. Just leave the video. Okay. It is April 10th, 2025 at 9:30 in the morning, and I hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful Thursday morning, and I hope that you all are doing great in life and staying positive and drinking water. Okay, that's all the advice I have for you, which is the regular advice that you probably hear from everyone. So just thought I'd let you know that you should do that stuff and smell some books.